In this video, I'm going to show some of the techniques for manually digitizing a logo if you are not able to automatically convert it using vector. So I have imported a sign here, and granted this one could probably be vectorized using some of the techniques I've shown before. The first step that I'm going to do once I've imported the image is to right-click on it, and I'm actually going to lock the object. That way I can't grab it and move it around. It's basically just a part of your background. Next step I'm going to do is I'm going to do the outside circle. So in this case, I'm just going to grab the circle. If you hold your control key down, it gets you a perfectly aligned circle to the aspect ratio. So if you look up here, it's 6.056 inches on all sides. And I'm going to drag this down so that it's kind of centered over it. I got to adjust the size a little bit. Notice I have my padlock checked here, which means that I'll maintain the aspect ratio. Press 6, and it's still a little large, so I can just adjust the size down a little bit, maybe 5.9. And now it's a little small, so try 5.95. Now I pretty much match up perfectly with the edges of the outside circle. At this point, I can now go in and I can start digitizing the inner portion of the circle. So I'm going to use that by using the freehand tool here. And I'm going to click here, here, click again down here. And then about halfway up this circle, I click again, click one more time to start it, and go over here. Now that's obviously not a half circle, but what I'm going to do is go to the shape tool, and I'm going to select this node right here and say move it to a curve. You need notice these lines popping up here. I can now grab that line and drag it into place so that I get my circle. Now it's not a perfect match, so then at this point I can grab these little arrows and adjust it around until it matches up with my image. Now I'm going to do the same thing on this node, right click to curve, drag it up, and drag the arrows so that I match up the curves. And there we've got a good match. Now you could sit there and do the same thing in this curve down here. But instead, I'm going to use the pick tool and select the one that I just drew. Just moved it there, and I'll undo so it's back to position. I'm going to hit Control D. So now I got a duplicate of it. And if you go up to Window, Dockers, and then Transformations, and then I believe it's Rotate, it'll create a tab over here for you. And at this point, I'm going to turn Mirror on for both horizontal and vertical. I don't want any copies. Hit Apply, and it'll mirror it so that I can just drag it down here and put it into place down here. Well, it looks like the size isn't exactly the same on this image, so I'm going to once again go into the shape tool and just drag this to the points till it matches. Go to the different nodes, like this one right here, and then I'll just adjust these lines a little bit. But it just keeps you from having to completely redraw it if you don't want to. In this case, it would have been probably just as easy to redraw it, but I wouldn't have gotten to show you another technique. So now, if I go here and highlight everything, and I'm going to go to the object properties, which is also available under Window Dockers Properties. Now I got to find it because I lost it. Sometimes it'll move down here off your screen, so you have to click this little arrow down here. Now, in my case, by clicking the Docker, I actually just turned it off. So I'll click it again to turn it on. Change the color and change the thickness. Now you can see there's your vector outline of it. So now at this point, you can go in and you can do the same kind of techniques for the cigarette. In this case, we don't really want to make a solid block for the cigarette because otherwise you're going to have different levels of etching through here. So I'm going to just drag a rectangle around here. I'm going to change that background color to something else, like a blue, just so it's a little different. And I'm going to convert this to curves, which now means I can drag one of those elements to a different position. So once again, draw your outline. I'm going to change that color again for that one because I want them all to be black. Convert to curves, and then go to the vector tool and drag this one back here so it kind of matches up. And then you'll do the same thing for these three right here. Now those, because of the same size, we can hit Control D a couple of times, and we can move them into position as well. So now we have all those converted. I'm actually going to highlight just the cigarette in here, and I'm going to change the line thickness down a little smaller to like maybe 0.5 millimeter or so. It doesn't need to be quite that big. Now, this was the one that gets a little bit more interesting because you got a lot of different curves on there. So again, I'm going to go back to the freehand tool, and I'm just going to click at some different points along the curve. First thing I'm going to do though is reduce my hairline again. You can change that default by clicking on it before you start drawing with it. Just hurrying up a little bit here. And now you have a solid object. So you go back to your shape tool. We're going to draw a box around all of them, right click and say to curve. That way they're all going to behave as curves. And at this point, we're going to click somewhere outside of it to deselect everything, and then just grab each one individually and drag it into the shape of the outline. It doesn't have to be perfectly exact. You can make it exact if you want to. But you can see how easy it is to match those curves if you want to. And then I'm going to go back to my freehand tool, and I'm going to do the same thing on these elements down here. And once again, I'm going to change my line thickness down to 0.5 millimeter. Go to the node editing tool, highlight all of those, right click to curve. And just drag it so that it mostly matches your design. Now here, notice I goofed and I didn't put enough nodes in. All you have to do to add an element is to click on there, double click on a line, and it'll add a node in for you. The other way that you can do it is by right clicking on a spot and hitting the add from the right click menu, but I didn't do that and don't need to. To change the default drawing, you click on the freehand tool, Click 1/2 millimeter. You'll get this little window that pops up, and you hit OK. And now when I start drawing, I'll have the thinner line. So once again, go to your vector tool, right click to curve, and match your curve. And I can fix this one here a little bit too because I don't like how that looks. That's just me being picky, but that's fine. So now we're done with the manual digitizing. We're going to highlight everything and drag it off to the left. So there's your drawing. Now obviously I want the cigarette smoke to be the same color, so I'm just going to click on that. Actually, I'm just going to draw a line around all of those elements. You have to draw a line completely around an object for it to be selected. That's why the outer borders and the cigarette didn't get selected. So only these will get selected. I'm going to change that background color again to the blue. And then I'm actually going to highlight everything here and change my line width to hairline now that I'm done drawing and I can see what I've done. So there's your digitized image. If you want to go in, you can do a little bit of cleanup. You notice that this portion of the cigarette's got a little bit of space between it, which would leave a gap. So we're going to go back to the shape tool or the vector tool and just drag that point over so that it lines up. And you got a cleaned up image. At this point, you can go over here and unlock that object. And you can actually get rid of it if you want to. From this point, I can highlight all of these items. I'm just going to group them because it seems to send to the laser a little better when you group everything. So now it actually is treated as one image. And at this point, I can send it to RDWorks. And I can set up my cut file. So the first one that it's going to do is the outline. We could actually have it do it all in one if we wanted to, because it's basically going to be the same thing. But perhaps you want the cigarette a darker etch than the red outline border. So in that case, I'm going to go over here and I'm going to move the cigarette one first up to the top. And I'm going to set that to a scan. And I'm only going to do that one at 400 with a little bit higher power. That way it'll give me a really dark image. And I'm going to set my interval to 0.08. And then you can also switch down to the next color. And I'm going to do this one at 600, which will give me a lighter outside border. And I'm maybe only going to do this one at, I don't know, 25. So at this point now, this is the lower power, and that's 600 speed. Get rid of the laser through mode and set that to scan. And if we want it a little lighter, we can actually leave the interval a little bit bigger as well, which will aid in making it a little bit lighter. So I'll hit OK. And now we can go in and do a preview on it. And you can kind of see, if you look here, you can kind of see that this one's going to be a little darker because of the tones of the color on the screen. So it's going to do the cigarette first. And then it'll go do the outside border. As before, I will do a actual time lapse of this cutting out on the laser. One of the things that I like to do, as I showed yesterday, is making that the outline a little bit more defined. So in this case, I'm going to actually do that I'm going to make a copy of this entire object, drag it over here, and I'm going to set the color to black. So now if I import into RDWorks again, you'll see I now have 3 layer colors. So at the very end is the black. So what I'm going to do there is what I did on one of my previous videos. And now when you actually send it to the laser, it will go back and do a definition burn around all of the different objects in your design. Stay tuned in a few moments for the actual time-lapse video of it engraving.